30,000 foreign troops will be stationed in Ukraine after the war ends. 35 countries have expressed their readiness to become security guarantors after the summit in Paris. But the US president is dissatisfied with the actions of the Europeans and is cutting back aid to the Baltic countries. Is this really laying the groundwork for a Russian invasion? At the same time, Trump himself doesn't seem to be planning to impose sanctions against Russia and once again wants to call his friend Putin. FP drones attacked the launch positions of Shaheds. They took off right from the forest nearby. Meanwhile, partisans also helped destroy an oil depot in Luhansk. In Lutsk, men fired at TCC employees. A village orchestra went viral with a new overture that every Ukrainian knows by heart. My name is Moroslav Solonar. Next, the main news on this. A meeting of the defense coalition took place in Paris, where European leaders agreed to strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities. According to Radio Svoboda, citing informed sources in the diplomatic circles of EU member states, more than 20 countries have pledged concrete steps. 10 of them have agreed to send their soldiers to Ukrainian territory after the end of hostilities. In particular, the UK and France, the Nordic countries and the Baltic states, the Netherlands as well as Australia may take such a step. French President Emmanuel Macron stated that the document on security guarantees for Ukraine is already on the table. All that is needed now is political approval.
26 countries are formally ready to send military personnel or weapons to Ukraine to support them. The coalition of willing countries has outlined security guarantees for Ukraine. In the coming weeks, we will find out how America will help. If Russia continues to refuse peace negotiations, new sanctions will be imposed in coordination with the United States of America.
Zelensky also confirmed that an agreement was reached in Paris regarding the presence of a foreign contingent. This presence will take various forms. Putin will be forced to make peace. We need to deprive the Russian military machine of resources for weapons production. According to preliminary data, the European mission in Ukraine could number 25,000 to 30,000 troops. However, these numbers may change. The United States will gradually wind down security assistance programs for European armies along the borders with Russia, forcing these countries to invest more in their own defense. This is reported by the Financial Times. According to the publication, last week Pentagon representatives informed European diplomats that the US will no longer fund training and equipment programs for the militaries of Ukraine and Eastern Europe. This primarily concerns the Baltic countries, which could find themselves on the front lines in any conflict with Russia. According to the publication, this move is most likely aimed at encouraging wealthier EU countries to increase their security assistance to border states. It is noted that European governments were surprised by the message and are trying to obtain more detailed information from Washington. Poland will not send its soldiers to Ukraine to participate in the European mission that may be deployed after the end of hostilities. This statement was made by Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk after the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing. The position of the Polish government on this issue remains unchanged. At the same time, Tusk noted that Poland's support for this mission will consist of coordinating logistics, since it is well known that the largest hub for aid to Ukraine is located in Poland. Poland is also not concerned by the fact that Russia is attacking its territory with Shaheds. Just recently, 2 enemy drones for a moment entered the airspace of a NATO country. The operational commander of the Polish army told Reuters that these Shaheds were not shot down, as they allegedly did not pose a threat. In addition, the commander noted that after being escorted by air defense, the Shaheds left Polish airspace without causing any damage. In other words, the Poles simply escorted them so they could go on to kill Ukrainians. It's just a circus. US President Donald Trump, after a phone conversation with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, plans to speak with Putin in the near future. The head of the White House shared this during an exclusive dinner with the leaders of the world's largest IT companies. Trump also said that he has resolved as many as 7 wars and has a very good dialogue with the Russian dictator. The conversation was heated. After yesterday's meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris, Trump had a very emotional conversation with EU leaders, according to the publications Bild and Axios. The American president accused the Europeans of continuing to buy Russian oil, thereby fueling the war. In response, Brussels reminded him about the reduction of imports and proposed to create a working group on sanctions. How Trump reacted to this is currently unknown. According to the publication, after this conversation, Europeans no longer expect Trump to impose sanctions against Russia. At the same time, after the quarrel with the Europeans, Donald Trump himself published a photo with Putin at the airfield where they are both looking at an American bomber and smiling. It is still unclear what the head of the White House is hinting at, but clearly something is about to happen. Despite all of Trump's efforts at peace negotiations, the Russian dictator flatly refuses to listen to him and continues to play his own game, shelling peaceful Ukrainian civilians with missiles and drones and advancing on the front. And what the Americans are currently proposing in terms of territorial exchange to stop the war is actually only beneficial to Moscow. Whether the negotiations have really reached a dead end and what to expect next, my colleagues will explain in more detail.
Ukraine, as the shield of Europe, President Volodymyr Zelensky warns that any territorial concessions to Russia will not stop the war, but will only turn the seized regions into a launching pad for new attacks. The Kremlin has already been working on this strategy. For example, Crimea became a springboard for pressure on the south, and part of the east was used for the complete occupation of the region.
If tomorrow, for some reason, we were to leave Donbass, which will not happen, we would open up an unprotected space for Putin right next to the city of Kharkiv with its 1.5 million residents. He would also seize the industrial center of Dnipro. This would open up new opportunities for him.
The president of Ukraine urges Europeans to think on a larger scale, because if the Kremlin had managed to carry out its original plan to seize all of Ukraine, Moscow would have used it not only against Kyiv, but also against the West itself.
If Putin had managed to seize our entire country, he would have used it as a springboard. Whether he does this or not will depend on how strong Europe is. If Europe is strong, he will probably do nothing, but if it is weak, it will suffer from Russia's actions.
Zelensky also reminds us about geography. It's less than 3,000 kilometers from Moscow to Paris, and the range of Russian missiles already reaches 2,500 kilometers today. Ukraine is also developing long-range weapons up to 3,000 kilometers, and the arms race is only accelerating.
With such technological development, there can no longer be any distant wars. Believe me, in 2 years the Russians will have plenty of missiles. And so will we, with a range of 5,000 kilometers. The sea won't protect anyone, the ocean won't protect anyone. In this regard, the weapons Russia is using today are not that different from nuclear delivery systems.
That is why the fate of Ukraine is not a local war, but a matter for all of Europe. If Kyiv holds out as the eastern border of Europe, Donbass will remain as well. If not, the front line will run through Poland or Germany, just as the Berlin Wall once divided the continent into two worlds. Against this backdrop, Zelensky allows for a Korean scenario for Ukraine, without a formal peace treaty but with a chance for prosperity and development. The only question is where exactly Europe is ready to draw its eastern border, in Donetsk or in Berlin. Meanwhile, new statements are coming from the UKN. Something is about to happen soon. They also announced their upcoming conversation with the Russian dictator in the coming days.
I think we'll sort everything out. To be honest, I thought that dealing with Russia would be easier than with other conflicts I've resolved. But it seems this has turned out to be a bit more complicated than some of them.
For the American leader, who not so long ago called the war just another conflict, these words sound like an admission that the Russian-Ukrainian war turned out to be much more complicated than he expected.
It's obvious that Trump will soon be putting pressure on Putin. I think a trilateral meeting. Putin is doing everything to make it seem like he's not interested in direct talks with the Ukrainian president Zelensky. Well, I think that a trilateral meeting is still more realistic, although, once again, holding it in the very short term is, in my considered opinion, almost pure science fiction. Plus, judging by the recent statements of prominent figures like Friedrich Merz, other significant European leaders, or even the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan, it's quite abundantly clear that right now it's indeed Putin. Putin is sabotaging the upcoming meeting. But the fact that he is sabotaging it now does not mean that Putin won't be forced to change his position in the near future.
But for now, the Russian dictator continues to spill blood on Ukrainian soil. European leaders are concerned about a possible new Russian offensive. Bloomberg reports that, according to sources at a Security Council meeting, German and French officials discussed the buildup of Russian troops near Pokrovsk. Volodymyr Zelensky himself recently stated that about 100,000 soldiers have been concentrated in this direction. The capture of Pokrovsk would open the way to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. These are key cities for controlling the entire Donetsk region.
I don't understand what new offensive in the east the Western media are writing about. Because there has been only one offensive, and it has been ongoing steadily for over a year, with varying phases of Russian activity. These phases depend on losses.
Vladimir Putin continues to deliberately drag out the protracted negotiation process. All those significant points that were clearly and directly voiced at the recent press conference in China should have, at the very least, and to a considerable extent, effectively cooled the fervent enthusiasm of the eager coalition that is attempting to form a comprehensive and final proposal on robust security guarantees for Ukraine. But what concerns me is that right now, what we are seeing directly in Paris, what we are seeing is that no one is even close to slowing down the process of crystallizing security guarantees for our state. And this shows that, in principle, we are making small, but still real, steps along the diplomatic track.
Today, the choice is not only before Ukraine, but before the entire West. The decisions that will be made at the upcoming negotiations with Moscow will determine not only the fate of Ukraine, but the security of all of Europe. Will peace be restored on Ukrainian soil, or will the war spread further? This is a question to which no one has an answer yet.
Last night, explosions were heard in temporarily occupied Luhansk, after which a massive fire broke out. Drones struck important targets at the motor pool of the Russian occupiers. Later, the Atesh movement reported that it helped carry out this strike on the motor pool together with a secret organization of Ukrainians. This oil refinery supplies the 41st and 20th Combined Arms Armies of the Russian Armed Forces. At night, Ukrainian drones once again attacked the Ryazan oil refinery. This was reported by Russian media and confirmed by the commander of the UAV forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Robert Magyar Brody. Numerous photos and videos of the fire that broke out after the explosions are being circulated online. According to the governor of the Ryazan region, Russian air defenses destroyed 8 drones over the region, but debris fell on the industrial facility. By the way, the Ryazan oil refinery, which is one of the largest refineries in the aggressor state, was already hit at the beginning of August. Mavkas rose up in the settlement of Navlia in Russia's Bryansk region and attacked with FPV drones. According to Russian media and war correspondents, the drones were launched directly from the forest. Navlia is only 70 kilometers from the state border, and it is precisely there that one of the largest launch sites for Russian Shaheds and ballistic missiles targeting Ukraine is located. There are currently no details about the consequences of the attack on the Bryansk region, but the use of combat drones launched from forests indicates an intensification of hostilities in Russia's border areas. Around 20 Russian Shaheds attacked Dnipro last night. There were loud explosions in the city, direct hits, and large fires. The state emergency service used loudspeakers to warn Dnipro residents about a chemical hazard, as a local enterprise caught fire as a result of the strike.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Fortunately, there were no casualties or injuries in Dnipro. Later, the state emergency service announced that the air in the city is clean and there is no chemical hazard. Ukraine's defense forces will establish a layered system to counter Russian Shahed and Gerans attack drones. This is one of the priority areas for Ukraine, as reported by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, following a comprehensive meeting with the military leadership. Currently, the task is to form as many crews as possible to intercept drones, train more drone hunter operators, and provide a greater number of effective means to detect and destroy unmanned aerial vehicles. The Commander-in-Chief also added that a decision has been made to take a number of steps to improve Ukraine's air defense system. China and apparently the EU are arming Russia and simply cannot turn away from Putin, since they are making huge amounts of money from the war in Ukraine. Investigators from the publication ZTL Graph have found that Chinese companies just in 2023-2024 shipped drone parts and components worth 50 million euros to the Kremlin. China is helping even now, and it seems on an even larger scale.
Beijing simply cannot turn away from Putin. This is the conclusion reached by ZTL Graph after analyzing how actively China is supporting the Russians in their war of aggression against Ukraine, just in 1 year, from 2023 to 2024. Chinese companies directly supplied sanctioned Russian companies with components and materials worth £47 million. And a quarter of that amount, about 11 million, went to the production of drones. Serhiy Flesh, a Ukrainian serviceman specializing in military communications, has already published dozens of photos of electronic components that were found in downed UAVs launched by the Russian army. Sometimes inscriptions with the names of Chinese manufacturing companies could be seen on the circuit boards. Sometimes the Russo-Chinese markings brought a smile, like in this photo. And recently, in the camera of a downed Gerbera drone, soldiers found a video from a Chinese factory where its operation was being tested. Journalists from Z Telegram, together with the company Sayari, which analyzes risks and data, studied global trade data, specifically China's exports to Russia. The investigators identified 97 suppliers from China who were sending components to the Russian defense industry. The top 5 Russian companies receiving assistance from China included the following enterprises: Ural Civil Aviation Plant, Akhmetron, holding PT Electronic, as well as the company Radioline.
In just 3 months of 2023, the Chinese company Ningbapik Cloud Import and Export sent aviation equipment and engines worth £3 million to Russia for the Ural Civil Aviation Plant, which is under sanctions for producing combat drones, including the forepost, used to track troop movements and strike critical infrastructure. The Russian Harpy drone, for example, is equipped with Chinese engines produced by Xiamen-Limbach Aircraft Engine, and production rates have increased significantly in the first half of 2024. More than 2,000 Harpy drones have rolled off the assembly line. Previously, Russia produced about 2,500 such drones per year.
Most of the Chinese goods go to Alabuga, the so-called free economic zone, which has repeatedly been the subject of investigations. It is here that Russians use low-paid, essentially child labor, and where they recruit teenagers from Africa who join the assembly line producing deadly UAVs.
Over the past 3 years, a Russian company, Alabuga Fiber LLC, has imported 3,000 tons of carbon fiber threads from China, worth £184 million. The Russian company Morgan LLC imported goods from China worth almost £43 million for a drone manufacturing plant in the Alabuga Special Economic Zone. Among its closest suppliers, Suzhou Ekot company Nazva Ekoyu was explicitly mentioned in details published online by the Ukrainian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha. According to the Center for Defense Reforms, Suzhou Ekot, which is under Ukrainian sanctions, has supplied products worth £1.2 million since it began deliveries to Russia in August 2024.
Investigators are certain that the figure of £47 million is far from representative and does not reflect the true depth of cooperation between China and Russia. This is because Ukraine does not always accurately record information in trade invoices. Most likely, this amount should be considered a minimum. Plus, it's important to remember that Russia and China share an extremely long border of over 4,000 kilometers. And both Russians and Chinese are greatly tempted to profit from smuggling goods.
Near Lutsk, men attacked TCC employees, took a pistol from them, and opened fire. So, in the village of Boratin, Volyn region, a conflict broke out during a check by TCC employees of military documents belonging to 4 men. 2 of them tried to escape. They weren't caught, but they began to resist the employees, the military officials, and the police. The attackers were stopped with tear gas. It is known that one of the TCC employees received medical assistance. He has a broken arm. The men who got into a scuffle with the military enlistment office have already been detained and sent to the police unit to clarify all the circumstances. For the first time since 2022, residents of Mykolaiv will have fresh water running from their taps. A new main water pipeline has started operating in the city. This was by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko. So, in 2024, almost 9 billion hryvnias were allocated from the state budget for the construction of a new water intake system from the southern Bug River. Construction work began in January 2025, and in August, the water pipeline was launched in test mode. At the same time, 1.5 billion were saved, which will be used to build similar facilities in other regions. Water has already started to be fully supplied to the systems and reservoirs of Mykolaiv's water utility. In just 2 weeks, fresh water will completely replace the salty water in all the city's systems. Mykolaiv has been without a stable water supply since 2022 due to the main water pipeline being blown up by the occupiers. The founder of the Telegram messenger called Slavs serfs and accused Ukraine and Western Europe of constantly invading Slavic states. Responding to Elon Musk's posts about the English word slave, Durov noted that it supposedly comes from the Old French esclave, which simultaneously meant Slav and slave. According to him, in the Middle Ages, Western Europeans, particularly the Franks, often enslaved Slavic peoples. Meanwhile, these countries never unjustifiably invaded the territory of Western Europe. At the same time, historians confirm that Slavs were indeed captured and became objects of the slave trade in Byzantium, Germany, and the Adriatic lands. The high percentage of captives is explained by their large numbers, as they were one of the largest peoples in Europe. The United Kingdom has imposed sanctions on those involved in the deportation of Ukrainian children, including Russians close to Kadyrov's mother. A number of youth programs controlled by the Kremlin, which aim to militarize Ukrainian children and instill patriotism toward Russia, have also come under economic restrictions. The head of Chechnya himself has already responded to the sanctions, stating that the West will regret this. More details in our report.
They say my mother has been included in the sanctions list. She is truly just a poor, small, and utterly helpless individual, someone who consistently dedicates herself to helping other people. So why is she under such severe sanctions, and why did they deliberately put her on the official sanctions list? What kind of people are you, really? Basically, are you people or just cattle? If you don't lift the sanctions against my mother, if you don't send a message to the Kremlin today, I simply won't let this go. She never took part in anything. She always just stays at home. She doesn't need any papers. There's nothing political about her. That's it.
So sanctions on the one hand are a preventive measure, and on the other hand, let's say a rather quick method for eliminating this element of propaganda influence. They are quite an effective tool.
Several countries have already imposed sanctions against Kadyrov's mother. Since there is a foundation that is supposed to help those in need, but in reality it donates billions from charitable contributions to the war.
So what I need is allocated to me by the Ahmed Kadyrov Foundation. During the course of the so-called special military operation, the Ahmed Kadyrov Foundation has already spent 42 billion rubles on it. All I have to do is pick up the phone and call Ramzan Akhmatovich, tell him I need something, and the very next day, I already have it.
But then over in the swamps, people start whining about this, saying, oh, mom isn't a political person, mom doesn't sign anything, mom isn't from Kadyrov. Mom doesn't get involved in politics at all, so there's no need to get involved in anything. She serves a symbolic function, being the mother of Kadyrov, who is essentially Putin's appointee in the region, because the organization, the charitable foundation, serves exclusively Putin's interests, the interests of spreading the so-called Russian world.
Kadyrov himself supposedly takes pride in the sanctions against his family and claims that they have no effect whatsoever. He even once celebrated his world record for the number of sanctions.
The highest number of sanctions imposed against a man, his relatives, and associates in the world, with a total of 68 sanctions. Our record holder is Ramzan Akhmatovich Kadyrov.
Today I am very proud and happy.
Another organization now under sanctions, the Movement of the First, under the guise of good deeds, is brainwashing deported Ukrainian children, turning them into potential cannon fodder for Putin's army.
And today I am announcing measures against those monsters who forcibly deported Ukrainian children and are attempting to indoctrinate and militarize them on behalf of the Kremlin.
In the Movement of the First, school children and students are forcibly enrolled, which is why the number of Putin's pioneers is growing at a cosmic speed.
The Movement of the First emerged quite recently at the initiative of your associates only in 2022. people are participating in this movement. Congratulations on that.
Agreed. Opposition. No, I don't know if children are organizing such a large-scale cultural event in the direction of some country of the Soviet Union, like some kind of pioneer, and in horizontal connections, exchanging with European countries, staying there for a while with families. Well, just again, not in Russia. In Russia, obviously, no one is going to go. But this movement exists from Europe towards the Russian-speaking countries of the Baltics, and it's quite active. For example, in Bulgaria, there are many Russian schools with Russian as the language of instruction. And for now, the attitude towards this is still fairly loyal. The same goes for Romania and Moldova, which are not members of the European Union. It has long been considered part of the Western side.
On the temporarily occupied territories, the scale of propaganda is off the charts.
The criminal authorities, with their systematic and pervasive influence, demonstrably take immense pride in their calculated and deliberate efforts to ensnare and indoctrinate the largest possible number of impressionable children into what can only be described as a deeply disturbing and meticulously crafted true Putinist cult. This insidious cult, designed to foster unwavering loyalty and ideological conformity, systematically grooms young minds, ensuring their complete absorption into a rigid and authoritarian worldview, thereby perpetuating a cycle of control and manipulation that extends far beyond mere political allegiance, aiming instead for a profound and lasting psychological subjugation of the youth within their sphere of influence, effectively transforming them into fervent adherents of a state-sponsored ideology, ensuring the perpetuation of their power and influence for generations to come.
They immediately enroll everyone, entire educational institutions at once. The Kremlin dictator, a real big bad wolf, tells children lies about values that neither he nor his bloody regime have ever upheld.
Do you know what the true secret to a fulfilling life is? It's profoundly about generously sharing what you possess with others. This involves actively helping others in their times of need, offering practical assistance and guidance. Furthermore, it means consistently supporting others in their endeavors, celebrating their successes, and providing encouragement during their challenges, fostering a strong sense of community and mutual growth. That's what truly brings a person the greatest sense of satisfaction and fulfillment.
And let Putin's henchmen shout at the top of their lungs that sanctions don't hurt them. But thanks to this Western policy, the whole world knows that behind the mask of charity, the Putin regime hides criminal organizations.
A village orchestra from the Kyiv region transcribed the sound of an Iranian Shahed attack drone into musical notes and created a musical overture with the same name. The orchestra posted a video performance of the piece on their social media. Every Ukrainian hears such overtures every day, said the orchestra's guitarist Dnipro. So, all that was left for the musicians was to transcribe the sounds of the Shaheds, which terrorized the Kyiv region every night, into musical notes and perform the melody. Kornienko says that the entire Harmony Orchestra supported the decision to create the overture, and in doing so, they captured the traditional sound of war. Moreover, they had no intention of frightening or offending anyone. The main idea of this musical piece was to show the whole world that Ukrainians are strong, creative and cheerful, and to once again thank the armed forces of Ukraine who protect us. These were the main news stories as of this moment. Don't forget, friends, to like our videos and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Ukraine Today.